one of the things that I've figured out is that you've already all made this speech. You made it today and at last night's cocktail party. I could have put it together from the things that you said. Honestly, just a little fragment here and a little fragment there, and you made this speech, so I could probably save you 15 minutes because you know it all. You know, I missed the 45th reunion, and I was sorry for that, but I remember fondly the 40th and the chance to speak before you then. And at that time, of course, most of us were approaching 60. And some of you possibly haven't forgotten Billy Collins' poem, Forgetting, that we shared that evening. But now, 70's firmly in our sights, and we're honing our forgetting skills. We're getting better all the time. Mark Twain is said to have remarked, and maybe he didn't remember whether he said it or not, when I was younger, I could remember anything, whether it had happened or not. But my faculties are decaying now, and soon I'll remember only the things that never happened. And I've been thinking it was a good thing that the reunion committee didn't include a Walnut football game on our agenda. I mean, think about it. The cheerleaders, there they are. They're belting out, "Give me an E," and, you know, nothing. And they try again, "Give me an E." Nothing. "I can't hear you," they shout. And after a couple of minutes, we respond, "We can't hear you." So, you know, here we are, remembering and forgetting, inventing, still thinking of cheerleaders, and keening our aging ears for an elusive E. Now, Corky asked if I would give this speech. He asked about, I think it was 2 years ago. It could have been 3, I don't know. But in any case, you'd think I could have finished it long before I did, but I didn't. And part of the problem really was finding moments of calm when I could separate myself from the press of ongoing work to let the thoughts and the feelings from the past surface again. And that really wasn't something I could control, and sometimes it wasn't so easy. But the moments did come, and I'm glad for the chance to share what they brought. And I found that one of the best ways to encourage and to welcome those moments was reading the class report that Gwen worked so hard to produce, and I know many of you contributed to that as well as to its production. I was, of course, saddened by the list of classmates who have died, and I thought about the interesting bios that they would have contributed, and certainly this reunion would have been much, much happier if they were here. I was thinking about it also. Don Litwin, who probably wouldn't have come anyway, nonetheless would have protested that his name is not Donald and never was. He was Don Allen Litwin. And there were just so many people that I would have loved to see again. Of course, the people who were mentioned today, but Marsha Lewis and Kitty Connor, I really wish they could have been here, and so many others. But the report shows that nearly all of us have faced serious challenges at one point or another since we left Walnut, whether it was caused by illness or the death of a partner, the breakup of a marriage, the loss of a job, or something else. But nearly all of us have weathered those storms and found new happiness. And there's a lot of resilience in this class. Many of us are retired, but some of us are still working. But regardless, nearly everybody, and I think everyone, is actively contributing to the well-being of their communities through all kinds of civic activities, work with schools, with hospitals, with not-for-profit groups, with churches. And when not engaged in family or civic activities, a fair number of classmates have other things that they like to do, such as swatting golf balls in the right direction or attempting to do so. And nearly everybody who tries that expresses a love-hate relationship with the game. I don't know if Dave Weiner's here, but his collection of more than 9,000 individually logoed golf balls shows the potential insanity that accompanies that sport. And I know a number of you also play bridge, and I was thinking about the perils facing anyone who is on the opposing side from Edie Moritz and Toby Fry. I wouldn't play bridge with those guys for anything. But anyway, there's another reason I didn't finish the speech sooner, and the reason is that part of me wants to finish things and part of me doesn't. And to be frank, I was torn between giving a talk that was as fun and entertaining as this happy occasion deserves, and reflecting more seriously on issues that trouble us all. And I'm afraid I erred on the latter side. So my apologies if it's a little serious at times. As a student of environment and human ecology, I'm used to the idea that everything is connected to everything else. It's a realization that builds understanding, but it doesn't make life any easier. Our attitudes and our actions, and some would say our thoughts, ripple through the world just as the world's ripples lap at our personal shores. And internally, it's the same, with conscious and unconscious thoughts and memories and emotions, and who knows what else, in constant conversation, all of them thrashing around within us, often in opposition, on topics like right and wrong, me versus others, now versus later, such as my speech, safety versus risk, cost versus benefit, to be or not to be. Both sides of those dualities talk pretty fast, and they get in a word whenever they can. And it's a good thing that we don't hear all their chatter, because what we do hear makes decisions hard enough. It's been said that there are two kinds of people in the world. Those who believe there are two kinds of people in the world, and those who don't. and those two kinds of people are said to divide things in two or not. Judging by common behavior, most of us seem to fall in the first group most of the time, binning things as black or white, good or bad, etc. And my sense is that we'll do better paddling away from those poles to find more truth and enjoyment further into the spectrum. Anecdotes that you all mentioned in the 50th report seem to confirm this, as many recalled events at Walnut Hills that broke some rule or other. Why is it that we don't cherish or talk about a good paper we wrote? Now, I have to accept Maxine Fabe here, who did talk about a paper she wrote on the impact of the West on American history. But she's the only one. The rest of us, I think, were busy remembering and vividly accounting how we skipped school that day. I mean, even including the principal this morning, or how we smoked in the bathroom, or made out in the salt mines, or tied ourselves up with twine in Mr. Lambert's class, or dunked Alka-Seltzer in Mrs. Combs' inkwell, various things like that. Or we drank ourselves silly at Alan Claiborne's farm, you remember, or pulled other pranks. So whatever the reason, those memories seem very important to us. Perhaps because the rules are so deeply embedded that breaking them adds extra spice. Now, I hesitate and am fearful of saying anything psychological with Dr. Hertzman and Dr. Rutter and Sue Ellen and Peggy and Chris and Carolyn and all the other therapists who are in the room. But anyway, I'll try. But anyway, the rules are so deeply embedded in us that breaking them adds spice. But in any case, even at those times, we were good enough to avoid getting kicked out of school, but bad enough to have some fun and not stuck at either of those poles. The dualities really make us a uniquely interesting but fairly troublesome species. We've been on an evolutionary road to somewhere. Whether it's disaster or enlightenment remains to be seen. for more than 2 million years. And we're still learning to tame the fires that powered our individual survival for all of that time. Ego, sex, fear, anger, the more reptilian sides of ourselves that are tucked deep, deep in our brain stems. But even after all that time, able to spring into action with the slightest enticement or provocation. On the other hand, we've developed all manner of workarounds, very clever, to keep the reptiles asleep under their rocks so that we can be more social. Things like golden rules, codes of conduct, turning the other cheek, revealed wisdom, laws, regulations, courtesies, traditions, and rituals, and lots of cunning tricks, lies of all shades and colors, sizes, and perhaps most important, the ability to deceive ourselves. And all of this stuff serves, I think, as a continuing first grade curriculum, defining what's mine, what's yours, and learning to share and help. And it works too, sometimes. Works in fits and starts. The goodness in our nature emerges reasonably predictably when others are in need. Empathy, sympathy, kinship, reciprocal altruism, and even slightly purer altruistic behaviors spring to the fore, at least for a while, after a storm or an earthquake, a fire, a health tragedy, or some other emergency elicits our engagement. So part of each of us is a helper. Being here and rushing toward 70 is evidence of that. You know, at the time of our graduation from Walnut in 1961, our age cohort could be expected to live only about 50 more years. Women got an extra 6 years. Non-white men lost about 5 years. And today, white males can expect another 15 years of life. Both white and non-white females can expect another 16, but non-white men still lose about 5 years on average. I'm pretty sure that discrimination of all sorts, past and present, is the fundamental cause of the racial differences in longevity. But, you know, it's no surprise that people treat those of different class, color, ethnicity, or gender differently, and generally poorly. They always have. It's been a pretty constant theme throughout human history. And only in recent times have we attempted to come to grips with the costs of that behavior and see the benefits of eliminating it. And progress is still spotty. Now, more surprising in an evolutionary sense is that any of us are alive and here together to celebrate our 50th. Why do we get this old? Of course, we're not the only species to reach great age. Tortoises can live for a century. Giant clams and some cold water corals and several fish species can live for 200 years. And of course, some of our tree friends, the sequoias, the redwoods, the bristlecone pines, can live for thousands of years. But all of those species, those centenarian and millenarian animals and tree and plants, continue to reproduce throughout their lives, and each has the potential to leave many offspring while doing little or nothing to help them. In contrast, we humans have very few offspring, and we invest a lot in each one. Many of us have children, but I doubt that any of us have more than 10. That's the number that a Greenland shark, which is a pretty slow reproducing species, could pup in 1 year. And most of our kids are probably in their 30s or their 40s. There are probably a few in their 20s, maybe even one or two in their teens, but I'll be surprised if anybody here, particularly the women, have a child that they produced that's less than 10. So the bottom line is that we're one of the very few species whose lifespan routinely exceeds our reproductive span. Why is that? We reach old age because post-reproductive mothering and grandmothering increases the lifetime reproductive success, and of course, I'm pretty sure, increases the educational and social and economic success of our offspring. Mothering and grandmothering are key, but sustained parenting by fathers, grandfathers, doesn't hurt either. And nor do the contributions of aunts and uncles and other relatives, and of course, teachers of all kinds. So we grow old so that we can teach and help the few babies we have succeed. Again, we're not the only species to do it. Our nearest relatives, the great apes, do the same thing. And so do the elephants and some whales and dolphins. And all of this helps drive the evolution of memory, of intelligence, flexibility, adaptability, and culture, especially in our species. Again, we're not unique in that, and I'm thinking now of bottlenose dolphins, which use sponges. They'll dig up a sponge from the bottom of the sea and put it on the nose so that they can dig around in the sand to catch fish who are buried there and to avoid scratching up their noses. And it turns out that that is a matrilineal trait. The only dolphins that do it are babies, calves of mothers who did it. And you see the same thing in chimpanzees with tool using and blowing of bubble rings in dolphins and porpoises and beluga whales. Again, it's something that mothers teach. We don't know the utility of that, but it's a cultural kind of a construct. So, in essence, our ability to celebrate a 50th reunion is less about us than about what we aspire for children and grandchildren, and not just our own, but everyone's, because all of us have a stake in creating and maintaining the kind of society that nurtures both human children and the children of whales, orangutans, elephants, fish, and redwood trees. To do all that stuff, we have to remember the lessons of the past and pass those memories forward. A long-lived mother elephant, who might live 70, 80, even close to 100 years, can remember the distant water hole to which her mother or grandmother led her. And during a terrible drought, she will be able to lead her child and that herd to that same water hole when drought strikes again. So we oldsters remember and transmit similar knowledge. We pass forward information, science, skills, tricks of our trades. We highlight transformational people that we want our children to emulate. We pass forward information on great books and art and music or poetry that inspires. And we share lessons learned from our personal experience, from the mistakes that we've made, from the errors of judgment that we've made, and also the lessons learned from the mistakes of others, including big ones, slavery, the Holocaust, just as examples. And we use all that learning and all that memory to teach kids, do it that way and do it better, or never again. We must never let that happen again. But no matter how fine and practiced our veneer, the snakes lie waiting, ready to hiss or strike at perceived threats at self or status quo, and finding the appropriate balance between self-protection and helping others succeed is an age-old conundrum. Advances come fitfully depending on alliances and circumstances, and it's not just a problem for individuals, it's a problem for all of our social constructs, the groupings we create, be they families or tribes or political parties or nations. Just as one example, the corporations, the new people on the block, must decide how fiercely to compete and how much money to hoard for their self-aggrandizement, market share, net profits, and so forth, and their self-protection through research, development, acquisitions, and how much work to outsource to robots or more poorly paid labor in other countries at the expense of local labor? And what salaries and benefits to provide their workers? And how big should be the differential between the lowest paid worker and the CEO? And on the other hand, how much should they dispense in philanthropy for good causes or bad causes? And how many environmental rules and other rules should they avoid in order to let the rest of the world pay the costs and avoid the costs themselves? So the self-other division occurs everywhere you look. Fortunately, in that regard, some of the companies are beginning to look outward, and aided by the not-for-profit group Ceres, enlightened companies are developing a triple bottom line now, representing economic, social, and environmental performance: profit, people, and planet. And there are now 1,500 companies that use the Ceres guidelines and participate annually in a global reporting initiative. So in some instances, I think corporations are actually leading us toward where we need to be. But similar tension is rampant in our largest group creation, government, where disagreements or violence rage nearly everywhere about personal rights versus government power, and questions such as what tangible benefits should governments give to their citizens, and who should receive those benefits, and what should some citizens give up so that others or the whole society can benefit more fully. And how should society repay contributions or sacrifices that citizens make toward meeting social goals? I think these have always been with us, and our ancestors probably wrestled with these kinds of questions even before they could write anything down. But you certainly see these concerns in legal codes from ancient Egypt and Hammurabi onwards. Our struggles in the United States several millennia later show the continuing centrality of this self-other conflict and the range of perspectives about it. Is President Obama a socialist, a pawn of corporations or lobbyists, or a fair-minded guy trying to do his best for all of us? Depends on the glasses you wear. But the ferocity of opinion reveals how deeply we feel those tensions and how quickly our snakes awaken to strike at challenges to self-interest. Resolving the self-other tensions successfully will take more time than we've had to give. We've only been at this game for some thousands of years, and it will take many more generations before we hopefully get it right. However, those generations are going to require constant work from everyone. And most of the work is going to be guided by remembering what worked, what didn't, and passing that information forward as effectively as we can. This is more than a little ironic, of course, because we oldsters are the ones who have the most to remember, but as we grow older, forgetfulness becomes one of our great fears. And I know as I get older, I'm ever happier to forget and put down or repress old disagreements or grudges or other personal baggage. And on a larger scale, forgetting seems tempting for many things that I wish had never happened. It would be less painful. But forgetting them would do us all a disservice, as any lessons learned would be lost too. So, uncomfortable as they are, it seems better to me to carry the burdens and the bitterness of war, and our country has been at war just about every year since we've been in nursery school. To carry those memories of the Holocaust, nuclear bombs, and our futile attempts to get under desks and escape, and segregation and discrimination and genocide, fraud on scales we've never seen before, and the stupidity and the cynicism that have spawned so many of those things. So, in my opinion, and here I differ with John Sweet's very thoughtful article in Gleam, which I enjoyed very much, but didn't read until after I wrote this speech, or I might have done it differently. Anyway, I say forget forgetting if you can. Robert Pinsky, who was poet laureate consultant in poetry to the Library of Congress from 1997 to 2000, captured all this beautifully in his poem called The Forgetting. It was published in 2007, and I want to read it to you. The forgetting I notice most as I get older is really a form of memory, the undergrowth of things unknown to the young that I have forgotten. Memory of so much crap, jumbled with so much that seems to matter. Lieutenant Callie, Captain Easy, Mei Ling Sung, Sibi Sisti, and all the forgettings that preceded my own. Baghdad, Egypt, Greece, the plains, centuries of lootings of antiquities, obscure atrocities. Imagine a big tent filled with mostly kids yelling for poetry. In fact, it happened. I was there in New Jersey at the famous poetry show. I used to wonder, what if the Baseball Hall of Fame overflowed with too many thousands of greats, all in time unremembered? Hardly anyone can name all 8 of their great-grandparents. Can you? Will your children's great-grandchildren remember your name? You'll see, you little jerks, your favorite music and your political furors, too, will need to get sorted in dusty electronic corridors. In 1972, Zhou Enlai was asked the lasting effects of the French Revolution. Too soon to tell. Remember? Or was it Mao Zedong? Poetry made of air strains to reach back to begats, and suspiring forward into air, grunting to beget the hungry or overfed future. Ezra Pound praises the emperor who appointed a committee of scholars to pick the best 450 no plays and destroy all the rest, the fascist. The stand-up master, Stephen Wright, says he thinks he suffers from both amnesia and deja vu. I feel like I've forgotten this before. Who remembers the arguments when jurors gave Pound the only prize for poetry awarded by the United States government until then? I was in the big tent when the guy read his poem about how the Jews were warned to get out of the Twin Towers before the planes hit. The crowd was applauding and screaming. They were happy. It isn't that they were anti-Semitic or anything. They just weren't listening. Or, no, they were listening. But that certain way, in it comes, you hear it, and that self-same second you swallow it or expel it, an ecstasy of forgetting. So, as long as we can, we should keep the memories, those painful memories, alive and shout, never again, over and over, until it finally sinks into the brains of enough people to make a difference. But that's a lot to ask, and we may not be up to the challenge. Once we were. Not at Walnut, perhaps, where far too much went over most of our heads or seemed beneath our attention. But afterwards, in the late 60s and 70s, when actions mattered and so much got done. And it seemed as if we made progress, too. The air got better, the water got cleaner, equality and equity increased somewhat, opportunities for women improved, as did opportunities for minorities. The economy grew, parks flourished, we saved the whales, we became an information society. But we didn't pay enough attention to powerful currents working under the placid surface. Rising population, increasing consumption and consumerism, poverty and income inequality, persistent racism, class conflict, the rise of fundamentalism of all kinds, isolationism, global warming, and all the mischief that they would produce. We got very good at finding some kinds of answers. Just ask Google. But we lost interest in the kinds of questions that Google doesn't answer. How did we get here? Where should we go? how should we get there? Now, some of us routinely grapple with those questions on small scales, particularly those of us who sail or golf. You know, success in both activities benefits from having a goal, and golf sets out the goals for you. You tee up on 1, you chop away until it falls into the cup on 18, and you have a drink. Sailing is a little harder, as you must choose where you're going. If you aim for a picnic on Duck Island, you can be pretty sure you'll get there. But if you don't, you can be pretty sure you won't. And at a more significant scale, our country hasn't filed that float plan. We're sailing nowhere, and there's no picnic in sight. The discussion about where we want to go is vapid and rancorous, divisive, and above all, ineffective. And many of you pointed that out in the talk around this morning. And what of the planet? Since nearly every nation is now deeply connected by systems of finance, trade, communications, and many others, and since it's highly unlikely that we or our near-term descendants will ever live anywhere else, an Earth plan that specifies reasonable goals for population size, environmental parameters, human rights, and so forth would be useful. Now, whether the United Nations Millennial Development Goals will be sufficient to guide us is not yet certain. But whether we Earthlings can have a beneficial future without such goals is even more doubtful. Life flows, time passes, change comes. When we were at Walnut, we watched the slow progress of the hour hands and the minute hands of classroom clocks. We knew some big numbers too. We knew thousands, even millions. But now we count picoseconds and terabytes and don't bat an eye at any of Google's 1,000 zeros. Advancing technology has sharply accelerated the tempo of change, the pace of our lives. And we are now entering a very interesting period. We're not the first nation or the first civilization to face disruptive change. You think of the Neanderthals, Greeks and Romans that we studied at Walnut, the Mayans, the Anasazi, and so many others. But like them, we face a time of reckoning and a time of coming to terms with the truth and falsity and the costs and benefits and the effectiveness of everything that we believed in or have been urged to believe in. We've already survived many shocks to our system, fundamental shocks. Having acknowledged the difference between truth and perception, learning how others sense and interpret the very same event that we experience, but very differently sometimes, understanding relativity and all of its implications. We're getting a little more comfortable with the unexpectedly strange implications of quantum theory, the uncertainty principle, the mischievous septet of quarks and other invisible oddities that dance matter into existence. Black holes, antimatter, dark matter, old hat, even if we are a little fuzzy on the details. And now, parallel universes are all the rage. So things get even more interesting. If that theory holds up, there are an infinite number of universes out there. Any universes like ours will contain 100 or 2 billion, 100 billion or 200 billion galaxies. And if those galaxies are like ours, each will host huge numbers of stars. Our Milky Way has 200 billion of them, and the Andromeda Galaxy has 1 trillion. And current estimates suggest that about 10% of all stars have planetary systems. Now, not all of those are suitable for supporting life, but even if only 1 in a million of those planets do support life, the number of living planets in our universe alone would be 2 with 17 zeros after it. And a lot of interesting plays could be performed on those quintillion stages. And add an infinite number of universes, and everything that could ever have happened would have happened somewhere or in a lot of places. And somewhere out there would be a place where we wouldn't have to remember, forget, or grieve over the sorrows that we've inflicted on each other for so long, because they never happened. It would be a place of openness, plenty, kindness, and endless potential. But even if the theorists are right, we won't even ever be able to get there. So we'll have to do the best we can to make that world here. Earlier this week, while doing work on my Ocean Health Index project, I was Googling around looking for information on artisanal fishing. It's traditional small-scale fishing from small boats done for personal consumption or sale in local markets, and it supports the lives and the protein needs of many millions of people all around the world, particularly the developing world. So I was reading about fishers in Costa Rica and Mozambique and the Arabian Sea, Mexico, Peru, and all the challenges they faced and some that they created. And I found myself at a website put up by graduate students at the University of California at San Diego, and a YouTube video on their work with artisanal fishers in Mexico and Peru. The video ended with a song that I'd never heard. It was a wonderful song. It was so good, it blew away the discouragement that I'd been feeling about the world and the state of things. Who was it? Well, I remembered that on my iPhone, I had Shazam. I'd never used it, but it was lying there waiting for me, so I pushed the button. And seconds later, it identified the track as Brenda Fassi singing Vuli Nadella. The whole experience was really quite astounding. I then went to YouTube again to see if I could find her and find that song, and sure enough, there she was, singing it in a live concert in South Africa with Nelson Mandela in attendance. And that whole experience, Brenda Fassi's powerful music, and the technology that let me range instantly through time, because she's unfortunately died, and through the whole planet, and to find her, and to see Nelson Mandela, and to see all that he represented, it was deeply moving, and I found myself crying, which isn't unusual. I cry pretty easily when things move me, and they often do. But this was a mixing of joy and tears, and I felt it as breaking down the barriers between happiness and sadness. And it was a good reminder to me of so many other barriers that need breaking. And helping to break those barriers, I think, is a very good reason for living a long time. Having a 50th reunion together is a welcome side benefit of that. So if we can do all of that, I think we'll solve another interesting conundrum. You know, they say there are two kinds of people, the takers and givers. The takers eat well, but the givers sleep well at night. So I hope we manage to do a little bit of both, and from what I read in the 50th report, you guys are doing a wonderful job. So thank you very, very much.
How do you follow that? Steve, I'm speechless. And some people would say that's good. Our videographer was going to connect us to some music and feast on and enjoy the evening. Thanks so much, everybody.
Walnut!